It may sound paradoxical, but there are indeed African countries where hatred towards black communities exists. Welcome to another segment. Today, we'll delve into African nations that exhibit racial bias against black people. Please show your support by hitting the like button, sharing this content with your loved ones, and subscribing to help our channel grow. Your support is greatly appreciated. Let's begin. Libya, predominantly Arab, has historically harbored racist attitudes towards sub-Saharan Africans despite having indigenous black populations like black Arabs and Berbers. Instances of racist violence against black Africans have been documented, with reports of slavery persisting until the 20th century. Recent years have seen discriminatory incidents targeting black migrants, reflecting entrenched anti-African sentiment. Central African Pygmies, ethnic Pygmy populations face discrimination from Bantu peoples due to physical and genetic differences stemming from historical segregation. Pygmies have been subjected to slavery and are often marginalized in various African countries, facing racially motivated attacks and social exclusion. Botswana. The Botswana government's efforts to relocate Bushmen from the Central Kalahari Game Reserve since the mid-1990s have drawn criticism. Despite constitutional guarantees, Bushmen have been forcibly removed, leading to squalid living conditions in resettlement camps. The UN has condemned Botswana's treatment of the Bushmen as racist. Ethiopia. Racism in Ethiopia has historically targeted ethnic minorities and individuals with distinct Negroid features, derogatorily referred to as Shanela or Baria, terms originally associated with slave descent. Discrimination against these groups, regardless of their family history, persists, highlighting systemic biases. In certain societies, such as the Abini Habesha Highlanders, active hunting of the Shanela was documented during the 19th century. Despite the abolition of the slave trade in the 1940s, freed Shankel and Baria individuals often found themselves relegated to unskilled labor roles, facing ongoing racial discrimination in Ethiopia. This discrimination against perceived Baria individuals transcended social class, affecting access to political and social opportunities regardless of one's social standing or lineage. Former Ethiopian President Mr. Haile Mariam faced marginalization in the country's controlled press and public appearances due to his Negroid appearance, particularly concerning the Amhara elite. Conversely, his rise to power was celebrated by Southern Shankel groups as a significant achievement. While various populations in Ethiopia have encountered discrimination, much of this adversity is rooted in disparities in class and economic competition rather than racial differences. For instance, the Oromo and Gag communities, although socioeconomically disadvantaged, are not considered racially Baria by Highlander groups due to shared physical features and common Afroasiatic ancestry. Similarly, perceptions of racial differences distinguish Shanela from Afroasiatic populations, as seen in the distinctions made by the Anawa Anak Nayat of southern Ethiopia, who regard certain groups collectively as Jela in contrast to themselves. Moving beyond Ethiopia, other African countries grapple with ethnic hatred and religious intolerance, as seen in Ivory Coast's resurgence of violence in 2001. Foreign nationals faced violent attacks amid ethnic tensions fueled by the government's political agenda. Similarly, in Mauritania, slavery persists despite its abolition in 1980, with descendants of black Africans living as slaves to white Moors. Discriminatory attitudes, rooted in supremacist ideologies, perpetuate oppression and enslavement within Mauritanian society. The Republic of Congo witnesses stratification between Pygmies and Bantu ethnic groups, with many Pygmies living as slaves to Bantu masters. Despite their contributions to hunting, fishing, and manual labor, Pygmies often receive inadequate compensation, prompting legislative efforts to grant them special protections. In Rwanda, colonial policies favoring the Tutsi elite and marginalizing the Hutu majority contributed to long-standing ethnic tensions. Land confiscation and educational disparities exacerbated resentment, culminating in conflict that persists into the 21st century. During the 1920s, colonial administrations in African countries required individuals to identify with specific ethnic groups and categorize them in censuses. This approach portrayed Africans as individuals in need of guidance, while recognizing the Tutsi as the dominant culture in Rwanda. However, Belgium's stance shifted in 1959, allowing the Hutu majority to assume governance through universal elections after independence. This change partly stemmed from internal Belgian politics, with discrimination against the Hutus seen as akin to the Flemish Walloon conflict within Belgium. Belgian policies fluctuated significantly leading up to the independence of Burundi and Rwanda. In 1959, the Hutu majority revolted against the Tutsi, leading to their rise to power and the flight of Tutsis, who formed exile communities in Uganda and Tanzania. Post-independence, extremist Tutsis in Burundi oppressed the Hutu, particularly those with education, resulting in the deaths of up to 200,000 Hutu. The legacy of overt discrimination persisted in both Rwandan and Burundian governments, including the issuance of identity cards distinguishing Tutsi and Hutu. In Rwanda, political power shifted from the Tutsi monarchy to the Hutu majority. The Rwanda Patriotic Front, a rebel group, invaded Rwanda from Uganda in 1990, sparking a civil war against the Hutu government. This conflict culminated in the Rwandan genocide of 1994, where Hutu extremists massacred an estimated 800,000 Rwandans, primarily Tutsis. In Somalia, the Somali Bantu ethnic minority faces significant stigmatization due to their physical appearance and ancestry, with racialized epithets and discrimination prevalent in society. Journalists highlighting discrimination against Somali Bantus have faced death threats, leading to criticism of the parliamentary formula under the transitional federal government. In Tanzania, racial tensions exist between black Tanzanians and Indian Tanzanians, with stereotypes and discriminatory practices prevalent, particularly in business interactions and social settings. Despite the end of apartheid, racism persists in South Africa, with historical roots dating back to Dutch colonization. White South Africans historically enjoyed privileges denied to indigenous African peoples, leading to systematic racism, forced removals, racial inequality, and segregation. Racial controversies continue to shape politics and society in the country. In Sudan, black African captives in the Civil War were often enslaved, with female prisoners subjected to sexual abuse by Arab captors. The Sudanese government's support of slavery and military actions has drawn international criticism, including allegations of religiously motivated violence and human rights abuses. According to Mount University, the abduction of women and children from the South constitutes slavery by any definition. However, the Sudanese government contends that it's merely traditional tribal feuding over resources. Sudan is home to over 600 ethnic groups, including Sudanese Arabs, some of whom harbor unfavorable views towards black people and blackness. The country's elite, predominantly light-skinned Arabic speakers, often oppress and marginalize black Africans (ANS). Sudan has been a member of the Arab League since 1956, and some Sudanese engage in skin whitening, reflecting societal preferences rooted in the legacies of slavery and colonialism. In 2004, reports revealed an organized campaign by Jain militias, supported by Sudanese government troops, to expel 80 black African groups from the Dera region of western Sudan. This effort, denounced by Makesh Kaala, the United Nations humanitarian coordinator, goes beyond mere conflict and constitutes a systematic attempt to eradicate a group of people. Comparisons were drawn to the atrocities in Rwanda in 1994, highlighting the severity of the situation. Recent articles have documented the influx of up to 75,000 Arabs from Chad and Niger into Dera, where many have been relocated to villages formerly occupied by displaced non-Arab people. The Sudanese government's actions, along with attacks by Sudanese troops and Jain militia, have forced approximately 2.5 million individuals to flee their homes. It is emphasized that the color of one's skin should never define their worth as people. True greatness transcends physical attributes such as skin color or eye color. The goal is to create a world where individuals are judged by their character and actions rather than superficial differences. This concludes the video segment. We invite you to share your thoughts in the comment section below. Please support our efforts by liking this video and sharing it with your families and friends to continue spreading our enlightening narrative.